Now, concerns over the safety of Chinese citizens working in high-risk regions, particularly in Africa, were highlighted recently. In Sudan, 29 Chinese workers were kidnapped by a rebel group, they said, during a battle with government forces. And then 25 workers were held briefly in Egypt, but released after they got caught up in a local dispute there. The Sudan case is the third high-profile case of Chinese citizens being caught up in conflicts in the past year. Last February, more than 35,000 Chinese citizens were evacuated as fighting spread in Libya. And in October, 13 Chinese sailors were killed by gangsters who attacked their ship on the Mekong River. That's between Thailand and Burma. There's still confusion over exactly what happened in Sudan. The rebels, a group called the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, the SPLM, said they were holding the workers for their own safety after that battle with the Sudanese army. Currently, there are around 15,000 workers in Sudan from China. That's more than any other African country. And China has been involved with oil and infrastructure projects in Sudan since 1995, and it does import a significant amount of oil from there. Now, the workers had been employed on a road construction project in a remote part of the country near South Sudan. Well, as might be expected, the incident has generated some heated discussion online. And to get an idea of what's being said, let's now cross over to the newsroom, where our researcher Esther Dang is standing by. So, Esther, what are Chinese net users' reactions to this latest incident involving Chinese workers in a conflict zone? What are you hearing?
Well, based on the comments I've seen, there's a mixture of anger and sadness. First, have a listen to this post from You Xi Ren Sheng. It's a tragedy for all Chinese people to see our own countrymen kidnapped. And this irritated poster asks on 163.com, why are we Chinese always bullied wherever we go? Well, another user named Huang Liu complains about lack of gratitude from the Sudanese, saying, without the contributions of Chinese workers, how could Sudan, such a poor country, have achieved today's development? And then others simply hope for the best for those held. 千年老妖 has this to say on QQ.com. I just hope these workers will be set free and come back safe and sound as soon as possible. And I also hope our government will become strong enough to protect its own people. The kidnapping has also prompted complaints about Chinese companies operating in these unstable countries, like 旭旭我爱 on Sohu.com. Oh my God! Look at the kind of places Chinese companies have chosen to go to. This is really making money at the expenses of workers' lives and safety. And 永远微笑的生活 shares his concerns and hopes. Nowadays, more and more Chinese are working in other countries. I understand they work hard to earn more money for a better life. But if personal security can't even be guaranteed, what's the point of making money? I do hope Chinese companies will take safety issues into consideration when investing overseas. And others have more specific advice for the Chinese government. One typical example is Qing Lang Tiankong, who says, it's inevitable that more and more Chinese people will work in foreign countries. But their personal safety has to be taken into consideration as well. And when the worst happens, our government should have a rescue plan in place. I think America's Navy SEALs military rescue units are something we could learn from.
Okay, so returning to this specific case, while there's still some confusion, what sort of reasons do people online feel could have been behind this kidnapping?
Well, as for the reasons, there are quite a lot of opinions. First, Tao Duanfang, who claims to be an expert on Africa, gives these possible reasons. In lots of unstable places, the anti-government forces or terrorist organizations often kidnap foreigners for ransom. And for some relatively small anti-government groups, even if they can't get the money, they can get publicity for their organizations through this kind of action, as it's bound to make world headlines. And then their political message will get a global airing. Well, Chang Quxing, director of China Institute of International Studies, has this take on the Hong Kong-based One-Way poll. China has invested in lots of huge projects in these developing countries where the legal system isn't well developed and social unrest is rampant. And when turmoil erupts in these places, Chinese workers there will be caught up in the chaos, whether they like it or not. But there are also others who feel this is not random and that the kidnappers are directing their angers specifically at China, like this anonymous poster who says on QQ.com. Even before the birth of South Sudan, the anti-government forces in Sudan have long been unhappy with the Chinese government, who they think has supported Sudan's central government. And some Chinese working in Sudan also report that the locals aren't at all friendly to Chinese workers. But a lot more attribute the kidnapping to political frictions over oil, and think that these Chinese workers have just become caught up in this struggle. For example, the Xinwen Evening News quotes a Mr. Luo who lived in Sudan for a year as saying, "This kidnapping is probably due to the unfair distribution of oil profits between Sudan and South Sudan. The newly born South Sudan owns 3/4 of the oil resources of the former Sudan. But due to the lack of oil pipelines, they have to deliver the oil to Port Sudan. But unfortunately, these two sides haven't reached an agreement on the distribution of oil income yet." And Pei Haozi has this take on dfdaily.com. Although people in South Sudan have hope for the country's future, the disagreements between the two sides over issues like the demarcation of the borders, the distribution of oil, and the responsibility of paying back foreign debts are like a time bomb that will stir up conflicts between them. And lots of experts regard this kidnapping as the SPLM's bargaining chip to negotiate with the central government.
Right. Finally, Esther, unfortunately, this is not the first time that Chinese workers have been kidnapped or even killed in Africa. So how do Chinese posters view the security of these workers in Africa in general?
Well, yes. Actually, just looking at Sudan, back in 2004, 2 Chinese engineers were kidnapped. Then in 2008, 5 Chinese people were killed. Last year, 1 Chinese oil worker was shot dead and another was injured. And QQ.com, a popular Chinese web portal, published a feature on this topic in which it points out that in the Delta regions of Nigeria, Chinese oil workers have been kidnapped on multiple occasions. And the feature also complains about the priorities, saying, "Chinese companies have invested in plenty of projects in remote and unstable areas of Africa, but they haven't paid attention to Chinese workers' safety at the same time. In contrast, many Western countries aren't willing to invest in these areas. And in fact, China has become the most important investor in sub-Saharan Africa over the past decade." And others criticize Chinese companies for only caring about their relationship with the ruling parties, but warn that this would backfire in areas where regimes often change frequently. Shi Yinhong is a professor of international relations, and he has this to say during an interview with the United Morning Post newspaper. "With more and more investment in these poor and unstable areas, if Chinese companies don't learn to develop relations with other groups and local communities, it will be harder and harder to develop projects there." And finally, this poster calling himself 为国人说话 has this more dramatic suggestion on homenews.cn. "China has to set up large-scale military base in Africa to safeguard the lives and property of Chinese people there. Our military mindset of never trouble until trouble troubles you has to change. And it's urgent to build up our military strength after our military deterrence is necessary on lots of occasions."
Right. Thanks for looking into that for us, Esther.